Hey guys, and welcome to my Lakota Civ Overview. In this video I'll be going over the unique units and technologies of the Lakota, as well as their unique end-team cards, and finally showing off some other gameplay so you guys can get an idea of how the Civ plays overall. So go ahead and starting out with their civilization bonus. They begin with 200 populations, but they cannot build walls. So if you guys have played Age of Empires 2, you'll notice that this is basically the same as the Hun bonus. So you have full population cap, but you can't build any defensive structures essentially. So this means they're going to have a very aggressive playstyle because it's pretty hard to defend your own base from harassment. So you really want to be out there harassing your enemy and not letting them get to your base. So right off the bat, that civilization bonus alone is already kind of setting the playstyle of the Civ as a very aggressive civilization. So let's go ahead and hop into some of their unique units that they have access to. So first off, we have the Axe Rider. So the Axe Rider has a fast and high attack as a cav unit. They're good versus artillery, light cav, and light infantry. So they're very similar to Hussars from European civs, but they have slightly lower hit points, but they have more attack, and they have a light ranged cav multiplier. So they have a 0.75x bonus versus light ranged cav. But otherwise, they're pretty similar to just the Hussars from European civs. I think they cost a little bit more food, a little bit less gold, so very similar unit, but just slightly different. Next, we have the Rifle Rider. So these guys are probably one of the most similar units to Dragoons, and they generally act as anti-cavalry, although uniquely they also have a multiplier versus heavy infantry and ships. But they cost 30 more food, they're slightly slower, and they have higher DPS, and they are better in melee combat than Dragoons. So think of them kind of as like a more beefed up version of Dragoons, and they're good against heavy infantry as well. So they're kind of filling sort of a unique role. So they're mainly good at anti-cavalry, but they can also be pretty good against infantry as well. They're not as good versus killing villagers as the Bow Rider is, which we'll get to in a second. But overall, very solid unit. Lots of multipliers. I guess so. All their multipliers, they have 3x bonus versus hand cav. They have 0.5x bonus versus villagers, so they'll be doing less damage versus villagers. They have a 3x bonus versus heavy infantry, a 6x bonus versus artillery and ships, and then they have 30% hand resist versus 20% range resist compared to Dragoons. So harder to kill in melee combat, but a little more vulnerable at range. So after that, we have the Bow Rider. So the Bow Rider has actually pretty similar stats to the Rifle Riders, but they're cheaper, they do more damage, and they have more hit points, but they have lower bonus multipliers versus cav and infantry. So I'd say generally they're kind of like a more cost-effective raiding type unit compared to Rifle Riders. So they have a 2.25x multiplier versus cavalry, and they have a 2x bonus versus artillery. So kind of think of them as more of your early game raiding unit, whereas Rifle Riders can actually, you can mass these later in the game to actually fill out a lot of your army since they're good against infantry also. So you want to use these to harass and just against cavalry in the early game. And late game, if they bring out heavy infantry in addition to cav, then Rifle Riders will be really strong. So after that, we have my favorite unit from the Lakota, the Tishunki Prowler. So this is a hand cav unit with a big attack, and they deal splash damage. And they can also use stealth to go behind enemy formations. And they're also more effective in groups due to their bonuses. So for each additional Tishunki Prowler in the radius, their attack increases by 10% of their base attack, and their hit points increase by 5% of their base hit point pool. And an interesting side note about that is that HP increase is actually scaling off of hit points calculated after other HP increases, such as their TP bonus, which we'll get into later. So it'll actually stack on top of other HP increases. And I made a whole video detailing how that works in the description below, so check that out if you want to look at that. And I also made a video only using these guys as like a raiding cav box. And they're very, very powerful for that, so also check out that video. It was a lot of fun using these guys. They are a little bit squishy with only 10% resist to range damage. And the thing about these guys, as soon as you start losing a couple of them, you'll lose their stacking bonus effects. So as soon as you lose a couple, they're all going to start to die off very quickly because the less of them you have, the weaker they are. So you want to keep these guys masked as much as you can. If you're not using them for raiding, the best way to use these guys is just to stealth them behind the enemy's backline of skirmishers and artillery, and just hit them from behind while you distract them in the front. They will just absolutely melt artillery and skirmishers when they're grouped up in a pretty big mass. They're very powerful, have an insane attack, so definitely try these guys out. They're a ton of fun. Next we have, I'm just checking, I don't think they actually show up in the unit tree here, but we have the Tokala Soldier, which is kind of like a special unit they get that you can either build, or you can either get from shipments or from one of their ceremonies, which we'll go over in a minute, or from certain cards, or from aging up. So you can't just build them normally, but from various areas you can actually get these guys. And the Tokala Soldier is a special unit, and they're extremely strong. They have very high hit points and a big attack versus infantry and buildings. They have a 20% range resist, and they have a 1.5x bonus versus infantry. So those are the Tokala Soldiers, and I know they don't show them here, but very good unit. So next we have the Khitan Bowman. So the Khitan Bowman is basically the Lakota version of the crossbowmen. Also, in that sense, similar to skirmishers. But compared to normal European crossbows, these cost more food, but they move faster. They have a higher rate of fire and therefore higher effective DPS and long drawn out fights. And they have a better melee attack. So think of them as a slightly better and more expensive crossbowmen, and they have the same multipliers as normal skirms, slightly better than crossbows versus heavy infantry. So they have a 30% resistance against range versus 20% resistant crossbows, and they have the normal 2x bonus versus heavy infantry, 2x bonus versus light range cav, and 0.75x bonus versus all cav. So those are the Khitan Bowmen. And then next we have another pretty cool unit, the Wakina Rifle, and this is sort of the Lakota version of the normal skirmisher. And these guys are very similar to the normal skirmishers actually, but they have lower hit points and range, but they do slightly more damage and are a bit cheaper to make. And they have the exact same multipliers as normal skirmishers from European civs. So compared to Khitan Bowman, they sort of fill out similar roles. This one just is probably a little stronger in some situations, but they cost gold, whereas the bowmen cost wood. So those are your Wakina rifles. Just think of them as your skirmishers and these guys as your crossbows. And then finally we have the Club Warrior, which think of these as the equivalents of the European pikemen, so it's kind of your anti-cavalry unit. In comparison to pikemen from European civs, they cost 10 more food and they do less damage, but they're slightly tankier. So they have 20% versus normal 10% melee resist, and they have a 4x cav multiplier versus 5x from the European pikemen, and they have a 3x bonus versus shock infantry versus a 3.5x bonus from the European pikemen. So those are all the Lakota unique units. After that, they also have a few other unique things. So the Lakota have unique building RTPs. And I was just seeing if it actually shows the TPs here. Okay, here it is. So the TPs are kind of the Lakota's only version of a defensive building. So it provides an aura around it that increases the hit points of nearby allied units by 10% of their base HP value. And it also increases their attack by 10% of their base attack if you have sent the friendly territory card. So you can either build these around your base to kind of improve yourself defensively, or what you're going to be doing more likely is being aggressive with these. And you can put these in important areas of the map and just be able to kind of boost your units around them as you're fighting the enemy. And they build very fast, and they can also be built by all your infantry units. So while you're pushing with, like, say, a front line of Wakina rifles, you can just build up these TPs and then have your cav running around kind of raiding them. And they'll boost kind of all the attack and that radius around it. So it can be pretty good. This does require a very high skill cap, I would say, to use these effectively, because you have to be really careful about when you're placing these, where you're placing these, and all that kind of stuff. But Very cool thing in using the TPs. If you stack a lot of these, you can get a pretty insane HP and attack on some of your units, but it just depends on like kind of if you're defending a choke point or not, and how many of these you can actually get up. So kind of depends on the situation on how many of these you're gonna want to try defending with. So those are their TPs. They also have a couple of unique ceremonies. So they have the fire ceremony. This is actually wrong, by the way. I don't know why they call it people ceremony isn't unique among the native civs. I don't know why it says that, but anyways, their unique ceremonies are the fire ceremony. So this basically increases their siege damage, also damage versus ships, but that's usually not too important. But it increases the siege damage that units do. So if you're cav boxing with the Tashunkis, you can use this and they'll just do some crazy siege damage. And then the other one is War Song, so perform the Tokala ceremony to spawn the mighty Tokala soldiers. So the Tokala soldiers, as I mentioned earlier, this will just slowly spawn them over time. So this can also be pretty powerful if you just want to get some extra units out. If you have, like 20 villagers in this, which is pretty rare, then you'll be spawning these guys out relatively quick, so it can be pretty powerful. They have really good unique ceremonies with those two. And then lastly, let's go over all their big button upgrades. So first, from their town center, they have Lakota Tokala soldiers. So for 1,500 food, you can get one Tokala soldier for every 3 minutes of the game, up to 30 minutes. So you get a total of 10 Tokala soldiers. I would maybe consider this in a longer game or like a team game, but in a 1v1 type scenario, I just don't think they'll have the economy to actually take advantage of this. I mean, if you do, I would say go for it. It's going to be good to get all those Tokala soldiers, but I would say generally I'm always pretty low on food because I'm using them for prowlers, so it's going to be hard to get this food. So it's unlikely that you're actually going to be able to take advantage of this one, even though this one could be actually pretty useful. Next, we have the market. From the market, we have New Year Festival, NC Festival. So basically just paying 500 of each resource and you're getting 2,000 XP. So this is sort of comparable to the unique monastery upgrade that the European civs get for the XP, except this costs every resource instead of only gold. So again, like I said, I think the Lakota have a really tough time getting a good economy going. So a lot of these big button upgrades are going to be pretty hard to get unless you're sending a special card to reduce the cost or something. But of course, if you can afford this, it's going to be good because you can, send a couple extra cards. So if you can afford it, good one to get for sure. After that, we have the War Hut, big button war drums. War Hut units train much more quickly. This is actually a really good one. So it reduces the build time significantly by 1/3, almost for all your infantry units. And this only costs 400 gold, so it's relatively cheap. So I'd say this one's definitely worth getting if you're building a lot of infantry. If you're in the early game and you're mainly building cav, I wouldn't worry about it. This is more, a little bit later in the game when if you need to really be spamming out the infantry, then you're gonna want to get this. But otherwise, don't worry about it if you're mainly using cavalry. From the community plaza, we have Battle Anger. Your war chief now does greatly increased damage versus artillery. So 900% increase versus artillery. That's pretty crazy. Lakota war chief in general is really good and really mobile. So I don't know how necessary this is because you should have so much cav that you can just kill his artillery anyways. But if you really need that extra, if he's really building a lot of artillery and you need a counter to that, then maybe consider getting this one if you're good at microing your war chief. But if you're not very good at microing your war chief or he doesn't have a lot of artillery, then don't even bother. I mean, it's kind of expensive, 600 gold for this, so it's going to be a pretty niche situation where you're going to use that. Next, we have Tribal Marketplace. So we have cooperation. Villagers at the Tribal Marketplace generate XP, and this reduces the cost of native support shipments. It's definitely not cheap. It's 600 food, 600 wood. So for me, when looking at this one, I almost never get this. I think I kind of see this one as a pretty bad upgrade. Let me know what you guys think if you think I'm getting this wrong, but to me this seems like a pretty bad upgrade, like for costing this much. You'd have to have a really heavily native support shipment-based strategy to make use of this. And I just don't think that would be very good to actually use. You'd have to get like 6 different shipment cards or something. So I would say this one's definitely not worth it, but let me know what you guys think about that one. After that, we have the farm. This is probably, in my opinion, their best big button upgrade. So you have horsemanship. Lakota cavalry hit points up by 10%. This only costs 500 gold. So I think this is actually really worth it, because a lot of times you're going to be building mainly cavalry with the bow rider aggression and prowlers and stuff like that. So if you're doing that, then horsemanship is actually really good to get. So definitely, I think, one of their most useful big button upgrades. And then lastly, from their corral, we have bone pipe armor. So it increases cavalry bonus damage against artillery by 100%. So similar to before with the other war chief one, if they're building a lot of artillery and you're really having trouble with it, then sure, go ahead and take this one. But I think, with cavalry, you should be taking out the artillery pretty quickly anyways. So I kind of doubt you're going to need this. So I don't really see a situation where you're going to be making great use out of this big button. So generally, I would kind of ignore that. But yeah, those are all their big buttons, all their ceremonies, all their unique units. Like I said, horsemanship's really good. The prowlers are really fun to play as. Yeah, they have a lot of cool units, cool ceremonies and everything. Definitely good overall options they have available to them. So now that we've gone over all that, let's go ahead and hop in to look at their cards so you guys can get an idea of what kind of decks you're going to be building. So now onto the Lakota unique and team cards. And just as a quick note, there's so many unique cards amongst the native and just any of the non-European civs that I probably won't hit all of them. Well, I definitely won't hit all of them. But just know, I know I'm not going to be able to cover everything, but I'm just trying to cover all the ones that I think are interesting or noteworthy. But yeah, so we won't cover everything, but I'll try to cover all the noteworthy things that are unique for them. So starting things out, I just threw this in here because the villager cards you get as Lakota are some of the best ones for them that you can get, because their economy is generally pretty slow. So you're definitely going to want to be taking the 4 villager, 5 villager cards for the exploration and commerce age, especially the 4 villager card in particular. It's very useful. So those are pretty much always going to be your go-to cards for Lakota. And then on to some other cards. We have the War Chief. Makes your War Chief deadlier in combat, increases his hit points by 50% and damage by 50%, and he has an aura around him that increases unit siege damage. So in general, the Lakota War Chief is just a very good unit. He can convert human treasure guardians, he can one-shot them, he has a really good attack, he's very fast because he's on a horse. So overall, your War Chief is very good and has a good chance of surviving. So this is actually pretty good. In particular, this used to be incredibly good for cav boxing with the Chishuki Prowlers and including your War Chief amongst them. Now, since you can't cav box anymore, it's not going to be as good, but it'll still be really good just for any raiding. You bring your War Chief along with your units, they can destroy buildings faster, so definitely a pretty good card to take. Definitely consider this one. Next, we have Morningstar. So the approach of dawn temporarily reveals all enemies and treasures on the map. Enables your axe riders to loot treasures and gain greater resource rewards from them. Personally, I don't use this. I could see where it would be useful if you're going for like a heavy treasure strategy. I usually don't want to depend on randomness like this, because you don't know how useful the treasure is going to be. So if you want to go for kind of like a heavy treasure-based strategy, then you could take this and use your axe riders and then combo this with, there's another card that turns your axe riders into rifle riders later on, I think. So you could kind of combo those two, but in general, I wouldn't worry too much about this one. I think it could be okay, but I don't think it's as high a priority as a lot of other cards that they can get. So moving on to Nomadic Expansion. TPs are cheaper, harder to destroy, and you can build more of them. TP would cost minus 25% hit points up by 50%, and you can build 8 more of them. So I do like this card. I wouldn't send it early. I would send it later on once you're maxed out on TPs. But I think in general, yeah, I mean, I just put out a video about TPs a few weeks ago, so definitely check that out if you haven't already. It kind of goes over all the stat increases that TPs provide. But basically, yeah, TPs can boost your HP and health by a pretty large amount. So if you want to use TPs as a big part of your strategy, then you'll definitely want this card. If you're not planning on using them, which I think is a bad idea because, I mean, Lakota just by themselves, like, I mean, they're not amazing, so they need something to help them out, and I think TPs are kind of a unique thing that helps them out a lot. So I would definitely try, aside from early raiding, if you get past that point in the game, you're definitely going to want this to help you out later in the game, in my opinion. So I think if you're planning on not, just going for an all-in early in the game, then you're probably going to want this card at some point. Earth bounding for the rest of your game, you get small trickle of wood and coin. So I don't think this card's that good. I mean, the thing is, the Lakota in general don't have a very good economy. I mean, maybe people have some build orders where they can get a pretty good economy, but the thing is, if you put that much into your economy, then you won't have a good military, and that's really the strength of the Lakota is getting out a big army early and sustaining that. So if you're not doing that, then you're kind of not using the strength of the Lakota, and you're giving that up for just a poor economy that could easily be beat by a lot of other civs better economies. Like pretty much any European civ, I would say, with the factories in an industrial age, is going to outproduce this anyways. So I don't take this. I think it doesn't play into the strengths of the civ, and it tries to make up for the weakness, but it's just not good enough in my opinion. So I think I would avoid this card and just try to use other strategies to win your games, and don't rely too much on your economy. You want to rely on your military strength of the Lakota. Next we have Evening Star. Okay, this is what I was talking about. Turns all the Axe Riders into Rifle Riders. So yeah, I mean, you could go for an early strategy with Axe Riders, go for some raiding, get all the treasure, combo that into Evening Star for the later game, so you have Rifle Riders against heavy infantry. I could definitely see that being a viable strategy. I don't use it myself because I think you're using 2 cards for that strategy, and I mean, I don't know if it's better or not, but I just feel better about, getting like 700 gold and food crates. You might as well just, like, you're taking these 2 cards, but you could spend those 2 cards to get 700 food, 700 gold, and just get up to the Fortress Age and be ahead of your opponent, right? And get like some of these other better cards. So in my opinion, you use 2 cards for that strategy, but you give up a lot. So I would only do that if you're planning on staying in the Commerce Age and battling it out there. But if you ever want to get up to a Fortress Age, then I would say don't do that. Anyways, moving on. Advanced Scouts. Scouts can now be trained from your town center, and their combat ability is enhanced. Their damage is up by 200%, hit points by 50%. So, I don't know. To be honest, I haven't used their Scouts that much, so I'm not sure if this is that useful. Let me know in the comments below. In general, with a lot of the Native American or any nation, really, I really don't use Scouts for combat at all, really. I just, like, the Scouts' role is for map control and to scout out what's going on. I don't want to send them into combat. I understand it could be good for early game aggression or something, but again, same as my logic here, it's like, you're spending a whole card on this. You could spend a card to send some unit shipment. You could send 7 Club Warriors instead of getting this card and then building Scouts, right? And you're already sending a military unit. That's probably better than Scout anyways. So why would you waste this card? So that's my thinking, is why I would never take this card. But let me know in the comments if you found a viable strategy with that. Next we have Windrunner. All infantry speed increased by 10%. Yeah, seems pretty useful to me if you're going for a heavily infantry-based strategy. I think most people with the Lakota go for cavalry because that's kind of their strength, so this usually probably wouldn't be a high priority, but if you feel like going infantry, sure, take that card. It's going to be good, of course. Next we have Onakari. Ritually purified Tokala soldiers do increased damage to infantry. Okay, so I was looking at this card before. I'm not sure I totally understand it, so from what I see, it just says it adds a one to hand attack. Now, 1 damage really isn't significant, especially for these guys who already have a very high attack. So maybe I'm missing something. You guys can let me know, but to me this card seems super useless, to be honest, in the current state. And I really feel like I'm missing something, because 1 hand attack to me seems like just pretty much nothing. Like I said, these Tokala soldiers, they already have a pretty high attack, and you're only getting them from the shipment, so you're not massing them. So adding 1 attack to 2 Tokala soldiers, to me, seems like a complete waste of a card. Like, it's barely gonna help kill anything. Maybe you have like 5 of them at most or something, and each of them does 1 extra damage. I mean, what is that really gonna accomplish? So yeah, to me this seems like a complete waste of a card. I would never take this card. But let me know if I'm missing something there. Next we have new ways. Enable certain European arsenal improvements in your TPs. Yeah, so you get some, I won't go over all these upgrades, partly because I don't remember all of them, but I know some notable ones. I know the Cavalry Cuirass increases Cav HP by 10%, Pillage increases Cav siege damage by 25%. Those are the ones I usually get because I'm usually doing cavalry strategies as Lakota. Oh yeah, and range cavalry caracal. I can't remember what that is. I think it's maybe damage, but either way, it gives you some improvements to your infantry and cavalry. So I think pretty useful card just in general to have in your deck. To send when you're at a point in the game when you don't have any more unit shipments left and you want to upgrade your units, will definitely be useful in that scenario. Next we have Friendly TP, very good card. TP's now boost attack as well as hit points. So, like I talked about in my video, TPs will give a 10% boost to HP, and then this will boost the attack as well. So if you're doing a strategy where you're using a lot of TPs and putting them in forward bases and stuff like that, you're definitely going to want this card to boost the attack of your soldiers. This a really good combo with this kind of strategy is you build like Wakina rifles, right? So you build the Wakina rifles, you have your infantry front line. They can build TPs, so you just have them build the TPs and camp there with the increased attack from the rifles, so they can hit people who are trying to kill the TPs. And then you can have your cavalry kind of raiding their villagers from behind, and then you can just pick the fight with their soldiers. So then if they try to attack your Wakina rifle sitting at the TP, well then now you bring your cavalry in and collapse on them, and you should be able to take out their whole army. So I think this can be very strong if you play it right. So I really like this card. I really like that playstyle in general of building TPs, moving up, camping there, hitting their villagers with their cav, bringing them back, and then hitting their army. I think it can be very strong, and it takes a very good player to counter that. Next we have aggressive policy. Your war hut units can build war huts and corrals. So I think by default the club warriors, Rakina rifles, and bowmen can all build TPs, and this allows them to also build war huts and corrals. So yeah, like I said, along with that strategy, this could be useful because now next to your TPs you can also build these buildings to kind of distract the enemy from hitting your TPs or just to spawn troops out of the forward base. So pretty good. Definitely consider taking that in your lineup. Next we have Kansenku. Now your war chief can strike a mighty blow, killing and wounding all nearby enemies. I think this is basically the same as the swashbuckler attack from the European civs for their explorers. So yeah, I mean, it's alright. It's pretty good. Same role. If it's the same role as the European explorer swashbuckler attack. I think their war chief is already pretty good, so I don't know that that's really necessary, and you probably don't want to be going that close to all their melee units that often, so I don't know. I don't prioritize this, but I'll usually get it if the game goes on long enough. Next we have Marauders. Tashinki Prowler build limit is significantly increased. So build limit increased by 30%. This actually used to be 50%. They have since nerfed it. So I also made a video about these guys, just building them and cav boxing with them. They're incredibly strong. Now, they're incredibly strong in one way, and that's basically raiding enemies' economy, destroying other buildings, and the enemy really can't do much against it. So to me, they're sort of like a supercharged version of the Oprechniks from the Russians and that cav boxing strategy. And these guys are just even better, but they take longer to get going. But they're even better at doing the same thing. So yeah, this used to be from 11 of them, you could go up to 22. I don't know what it is now. I think now you can build like 10 by default, or I can't remember if they lowered that. Basically, you can build less of these. So instead of 22 now max, you could probably have like 20 or 18 or something like that. I don't know, whatever 30% of that is. But yeah, point is, if you're going for Tashinki Prowler raiding strategy, then you'll definitely want this card. Next we have Mustangs, all cavalry cost decreased. I always take this card. I think it's very good. That's because I'm going with mainly cavalry-based strategies with the Lakota, so in that case, you'll save a lot of resources over time with this card. This can kind of push you over the edge in the Fortress Age if you're really trying to pump out those units. This helps a lot because your economy is pretty weak as the Lakota, so it'll just help you get out that many more cavalry units. I wish the reduction was a little bit more, but I think it's still pretty good and definitely worth having in your deck and taking this card. Next we have Black Arrow. Native allies train incredibly fast. So yeah, I mean obviously if you're going for a native strategy, this will be pretty good. Unless you have a specific native strategy you're going, I don't know if this would be worth it because I mean they are already trained pretty fast. And yeah, so to me, this is not something I prioritize unless you specifically have some native strategy that you're banking on. So yeah, in that case, sure, take this. Otherwise, don't worry about it. Next, we have adoption. Villagers train faster. Villager build time minus 40%. So on paper, this card sounds pretty good. The problem I have with it is by the time you're going to send this, you're already in Fortress Age. So Lakota, like I said, their economy is not strong. It's not going to keep up with European civs in the late game. They don't have factories or anything like that. They don't have, any wood, food, gold over time. Their economy really sucks, just to be honest. And so by the time you send this, you're going to go for a boom. Well, if you start booming, the enemy's just going to kill you because you're going to try to boom and you have less military. They're going to overwhelm you. So to me, the Lakota really are not a booming civ. You need to apply military, aggression early and kill their enemy villagers and just even out the economy. If you can do that, that's not going to matter because you should be able to have a bigger military and wipe them out. So I think by the point in the game where this would be useful, it's not going to be useful because, the game's going to be decided, I think, a lot of the time. I don't think the Lakota, it ever makes sense to get this card and try to do a boom. I think the enemy at that point is just going to win. Even if you do a good boom, you have a good economy, they're probably still going to have a better economy anyways because they're going to boom better than you. So unless you're just playing against bad enemies, then this card to me is not really going to matter at all. So yeah, I don't know. Take it if you want, but yeah, to me, I think... I don't think this card is going to be a difference maker. I think by the point in the game where this is really going to take effect, it's going to be too late. There's going to be a lot of fights already happening, and it's going to be decided by the military, not by how well you can boom. So with that said, now next we have the Dakota support. This is probably my favorite support card from them, and this is one area I'm not going to go over all the support cards. I just picked out some noteworthy ones that I like. So we have Dakota support. Send 5 Tashunki Prowlers and increase their hit points by 25%. So I really like this one in my Tashunki Prowler deck because it sends 5 of them. It's only 1,000 gold, relatively cheap. I mean not like cheap, but it's I think it's good value because it sends 5 of them plus it increases hit points by 25%. So I think this is a pretty good card, especially if you're going for a Tashunki Prowler rating strategy. So I think this is probably their best shipment. But some of the other pretty good ones they have is Yankton support, 6 rifle riders, increase their damage by 20%, so helps out your rifle riders. And 2 kettle support, sends 14 Marquina rifles and increases their hit points by 20%. So I really like all these because it sends the units and it improves them. I think there might be a few others like that. I can't remember. You can look through all these supports, but... yeah, I can't remember. I think the rest of them aren't as good. This one's alright too. Lakota support sends 4 Tukola soldiers and increase their speed by 15%. So if you're planning on, going for a lot of Tukola soldiers, then that could help. And Tukola soldiers are obviously very good. You also have Axe Riders, 6 Axe Riders, and 20% hit points. Same kind of idea. So I think I like all the support cards that increase the stats of your units as well, because I think you're getting pretty good value by sending units and getting that increase. Yeah, I don't really like the support cards that are just sending, like 9 Buffalo and 7 Axars. Like, why am I going to take that? That seems bad. I'm going to take this instead and get 20% hit points to them. That seems way better to me. But, figure out what you want to do and go with your own strategy. Next we have Center of Power. Reward Chief can use stealth now. This kind of goes along with the Tashunki Prowler strategy. Because the Prowlers can go into stealth, now your War Chief can also go into stealth. So you can have like a full stealth cab box, get into their base and just run wild. I don't think it's that useful, to be honest. It's more of just a fun thing. I mean, a lot of these Industrial Age cards, unless you're playing a big team game and doing the Prowler strategy, It's not really going to matter. In 1v1, you're probably never going to get to this point as Lakota. So this is only going to matter in a 4v4 team game, I would say, or a treaty game. So in that case, sure, I mean, if you want to stealth your guys, I mean, it's going to be fun, but definitely, I can't really see the War Chief stealth thing being like a game changer. I think it's more just for fun, so if you want to take it for fun, go ahead, but I think it's not a very good card. Next, we have Command Skill. Your War Chiefs are now also boost your unit's attack. If you get to this point, sure, I mean, this is probably one of the better cards, because now your War Chief can boost your unit's attack. So, yeah, I mean, you're always going to want your Lakota War Chief around your soldiers anyway. So if you're that late in the game, I think this is a pretty good card to increase, your unit's stats. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty good card. Then we have Uprising. You get 7 Khitan Bowmen, 7 Club Warriors, and 7 Wakina Rifles. Probably not great, but, what else are you going to do in the Industrial Age? If you get to that point, there's not that many options to choose from. Warrior Culture Villager attack greatly increased by 200%. Sure. I mean, again, Industrial Age. If you get to this point, maybe it'll help you out in some scenario where you're getting raided. But yeah, a lot of these, they're pretty niche. But if you get to that point in the game, then it could be a little useful if you're getting raided. But definitely would not prioritize this over better cards in Fortress Age or earlier. Then we have Old Ways. All special big button upgrades have their price greatly reduced. Now, I generally don't like this card because it's in the Industrial Age. I think if it was in the Fortress Age, it could be useful to look into. But, I mean, yeah, to make a lot of use out of this, you'd have to wait to the Industrial Age, then send the card, then get all your upgrades. And that scenario, yeah, it's going to be really good. But if you ever want to get the upgrades before the Industrial Age, then, this isn't near as useful because you're probably just going to want to get a couple of them. And then, you kind of have the ones you want. But if you need a lot of them, and you are in a game that's going to go this long, then yeah, it could be useful to send this and then get all your big button upgrades if you can afford to wait that long. But otherwise, don't worry too much about it. So that's all their unique cards. So let's go ahead and hop over to their team cards. So first we have Team 2 Native Scouts. So it delivers 2 Native Scouts and increases their damage against Treasure Guardians. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty good for map control, and looking at what other cards you're going to take, I don't think you're going to take this over 4 Villagers. I mean, the thing you have to remember in team games is some of these are good, but you have to look at what you're giving up. And if they didn't have 4 Villagers, 3 Villagers, maybe I'm considering this stuff. But these are just too, in my opinion, these are just too good to pass up. You need to take care of your own economy before you help out your teammates. So I think 4 Villagers is gonna help you more than it helps your team to send this. And I'm gonna probably say the same thing about a lot of these, but yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. You're probably only gonna get 1 card in the first age, or only gonna want to send 1 card before aging up, and that's gonna be 4 Villagers. So already all of these are disqualified, in my opinion, and the only way to look at these is if you're going to take them later. So if you want, to help take map control later, maybe you want 2 scouts for everyone. I could see that being okay. It will also help everyone take treasure, which again, it's okay. It's not amazing, and to take advantage of this, it's going to be in a 4v4 game, so, I don't know. It's okay, but I wouldn't say it's great, so it's kind of up to your discretion. Definitely a fun card to take a lot of map control, though. So if you want to do that, sure, take this card later. But definitely wouldn't take it early on. And pretty much the same thing with these two. I think I said this before in the British Civ overview, but this is basically the same, I think, as the British card. It's either British or Portuguese, where they get Team Cheap Docks. And it's pretty similar. So reduce dock wood cost by 25%. You're not going to want to do a naval boom until the second age, at least, usually, in Age of Empires 3, so you're going to be sending this like second or third. So again, I think it's kind of hard to fit in. I mean, everyone should just be sending 700 wood anyways, and that's going to kind of make up for it's going to be the same thing, but probably more helpful. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think Team Cheap Docks is like a very good card in general, because I think everyone might as well just take 700 wood and then just build their own docks. You shouldn't need to build a ton of docks, so I don't see this being too useful. But I don't know. Try it out for yourself and let me know what you think. Then we have Team Six Bison. I don't know. I don't know. If you're on a food starved map, maybe it's good. Personally, every time I see these like Team Six Sheep or Team Six Bison, I think they're all pretty trash. I mean, you should have enough hunts to get up, and by the time you get up, you should be able to make farms. And it's not gonna be, like, it's gonna be worse than hunting, obviously, but in team games where it's gonna matter, it probably shouldn't matter that much. So unless you're combining this with some other huntable card, then and like a food hungry unit, then probably not worth it. I'd say you'd have to have a pretty solid build order to actually make use of this. A pretty solid build order that needs this much food from hunt specifically to actually make use of this. Otherwise, it's just a waste of a card. Team 2 Surgeons heals injured units. Obviously, I'm not a fan of this card. Never have been for any of these decks. Then we have Team Native Warrior Societies. Team, you can train more Native Warriors, build them at plus 20%. It's okay. I mean, the game, to take advantage of this, is going to have to go into the Industrial Age, and everyone's going to have to pop captain their armies, and you're taking over the Native Warriors, and that's kind of the additional military you get, and you can increase the build limit by that. So, yeah, I mean, that's when I think you can take advantage of this. Obviously outside of like doing some native rush strategy, which you could look at doing this for, but I think generally this is not a card worth taking. There's too many other good cards in Commerce Age to take advantage of in team games. You're gonna want to be getting to Fortress Age yourself, so just take the food crates and gold crates. Those are way more important, I think, than trying to get native warriors built. Just improve your core military and age up yourself. Don't even take this card. Next we have team crates of 600 food. If you're trying to like sling your team, maybe you want to send this, but it's already in the Fortress Age. Everyone has kind of got, used a lot of their food. Maybe they're booming, so they'll need food. But they should have enough food to keep pumping out villagers. So if they are going for a boom strategy, they should be able to handle it themselves. So I think the same of these two. I can see them being useful if your teammates are specifically going for boom strategies or something and they need a lot of help with food. But, I think they should have enough food to manage. So I would say, the team cards have to be really good to make them worth it, I think. So I would just send crates of 1,000 food for yourself. If you want to do something like that, don't even send this. Yeah, it's a lot of food for everyone, but it depends how well everyone on your team can take advantage of it. And I think in this case, it's more helpful just to build your own economy more and get your own troops out. But yeah, if you want to send your allies, though, help them out, then sure, you can send that. Next, we have Team 2 Tokala Soldiers. I think this can be pretty good. I'm trying to think, it's in it's in the Fortress Age. I think maybe one way this could be useful, if you go for like a really fast fortress build order with Lakota, which Lakota don't have like a great fast fortress or anything. But let's say you're in a team game and you get to Fortress Age as fast as possible and you send this immediately. I could see that being pretty good. If you let's say you're in a 3v3, everyone gets these 2 Tokala soldiers and you just start raiding your enemy's economy. That puts them on the back foot and your teammates can get ahead as better booming civs or something. So, yeah, I mean, in that situation, I can see it being pretty useful to distract the enemy while your allies boom and stuff. So, yeah, I can actually see this card being pretty good in team games. But I would say in that specific scenario is when you'd want it. You want it if you specifically want to go for early aggression in Fortress Age to cover for your allies booming or something like that. Or just to aid your own, or if you guys just want to fight in the Fortress Age and this will just help everyone get more soldiers. Basically, yeah, if you need aggression in the Fortress Age, take this. Otherwise, don't worry about it. I already talked about 1,000 food. Team Canister Wagons delivers 1 covered wagon. Like I said, I think with Germans or whoever, pretty trash. Don't even take it. I guess I'll go into the reasoning again. So, town centers are 500 wood each. By the Industrial Age, Everyone should have already boomed. You should have already got your 2 or 3 town centers. I think, most of the time, you shouldn't be waiting this long to get that many town centers. And I mean, what's the real benefit of getting one more town center in the industrial age? I mean, you could keep it in your deck in like some weird scenario if your ally lost their town center and they need a new one, you can send this. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't really see it. I think a scenario where it could help, I could see it being useful is like, let's say y'all are base trading and one of your allies loses a lot of their economy, but you wipe out the enemy. You could send this. It helps your team get. It helps that one teammate get back on track a little bit because they can get this free town center and boom back up. But in that scenario, they're probably gonna, like, you guys should be winning anyways, right? So you're already kind of winning. Is this really gonna help? Is getting that one teammate back up really gonna make a difference? Like, are they gonna be the difference maker? Probably not, because they're the weakest. So yeah, I don't know. Doesn't seem useful to me. I wouldn't take this. Next, we have Team 3 took all the soldiers. I would say same kind of ideas. 2 took all the soldiers. If you want to go for like early industrial age aggression, which sounds pretty weird because it's not going to be fast to get here, then take this. But yeah, to me, Team 2 took all the soldiers and Fortress Age seems much more reasonable than this one. I would not take this, honestly. I would consider taking this, but once everyone's in industrial age, I can't really see 3 Takala soldiers making a difference, so I would not waste a card in this one, unless you just don't have any better cards to send. I mean, yeah, obviously it can help everyone just get a little bit more units out, but, yeah, I just don't see 3 making a difference at this age. I mean, they'll have a ton of muskets and everything by this point, so these should get wiped out super fast. Next, we have Team 8 Cheyenne Allies, Cheyenne Horsemen armed with a spear. I mean, that's a lot more units, but I'll pretty much say the same thing about all 3 of these. So you also have Team 10 Cree Allies. Yeah, I mean, I think I would say the same to all of these. It's just, they're not necessarily bad, but I think in the industrial age, I just don't see team unit shipments making a huge difference because everyone should be able to have, like, they're gonna have factories up and everything. People should not have a big resource issue at this point, and they should be able to pump out tons of ranged infantry, which will just cut through these guys. And it's more about how you're positioning your units and countering units, and not so much about just getting more units out. So unless one of these units hard counters the enemy, then it's going to be pretty pointless in my opinion. Just use the normal troops you have. Send a crate card if you really need economy. Just do something else, I think. You shouldn't be having a problem with that once you're in the industrial age in a team game like this. But if you do find yourself running into trouble with that, which I wouldn't understand, but if for whatever reason in your games you do have that problem, they do have 3 team unit shipments, so you could like go boom boom boom, send all of these, and now everyone on your team has a pretty big military and do like some big push like that. Like I said, they're probably going to be pop capped anyway, so I can't see it being that useful. But maybe one thing I could see doing with this is if you have an industrial age push and you guys all kind of like lose your armies in the big push, and you all have set your shipment drop off to be forward. You save up your 3 shipments. Your team is kind of pushing hard but losing a lot of units. Well, now you send all 3 of these cards, and now you basically refilled all your team's military very fast in the front lines. So in that very niche situation, I could see this being used, but like I said, I think that's pretty rare. I think it'd be pretty hard to actually see that play out. But if you were in that very specific case where you need to replenish all of your allies' armies very quickly because you're all doing a big push, maybe this is useful. But I think in most situations, I would definitely prefer just taking other cards to these, if there's better cards to take. But honestly, the thing about them is they don't have that many card options in the industrial age. So I mean, yeah. So I mean, maybe you do take these, just because you don't have a lot of good options in the industrial age. But I think that speaks more to the fact that the Lakota really just shouldn't be going. They're just really not meant to go for like a long game into the industrial age. If you get to that point and you're not going for like a Tashunki Prowler strategy in a team game, and you're like in a 1v1 or a 2v2, then I mean, I would think you're probably going to lose because the Lakota just have a pretty poor end game, unless your enemies are just pretty bad. But I think if your enemies are good or equal to you, and you're in the late game with Lakota versus like European civs or something, you should really lose most of the time, unless you just seriously outplay them. You're gonna lose most of the time, so that's why I don't highly value these. But yeah, anyways, that's kind of my spiel on these unit cards and team cards and unique cards. So with all those cards, now let's go and hop into some gameplay so you guys can get an idea of how the civilization plays overall. So now into the gameplay. So this game was a 4v4 where I was only building Tashunki Prowlers, and I was going around and raiding the enemy economy with the Tashunki Prowlers in a cav box along with my war chief. This strategy has actually now been nerfed in the latest patch. I guess it was pretty overpowered, but basically now you can't build as many Tashunki Prowlers and you can't cav box at all. So this has effectively been nerfed now, but I think this game does show the weaknesses and the strengths of the Lakota overall, though, which is in a large team game, if you went for a cheesy strategy like this, you're extremely vulnerable to early attacks before you're able to boom up enough to, get out these 22 Tashunki Prowlers. So before the fortress stage, you're extremely vulnerable. And we did get attacked. I was luckily able to not get my economy wiped out, and so I was able to raid, but my friend who is also playing Lakota did get his economy wiped out, or some of it wiped out, and he was not able to do the same thing. So it just kind of shows you how vulnerable they can be, but then also how strong they can be in certain scenarios. And I feel like that's kind of the story of the Lakota is they're kind of at either extreme, right? Like a lot of their strategies are a little bit cheesy. So, they used to be able to do this strategy to have really good rating in team games. That's effectively been nerfed. So now I feel like in team games they're a lot worse. Now the one strategy left for them in team games is a TP strategy, I think, where you could, put 4 TPs and have all your troops in there to buff their HP and attack a lot. That could still be okay in narrow maps, but I think in any open map they're not going to be nearly as good. Because really where their strength lies is actually in early game raiding with bow riders and other units like axe riders. And 1v1s are competitive games. And obviously in team games, that's usually not as effective unless your whole team is doing it. So I think they're just not going to be as good as they used to be. Yeah, like I was saying, I think the Lakota strengths are really in their cavalry and mobility, because that's really what allows you to get map control and keep raiding the enemy. Since they're kind of similar to the Huns in AOE 2, where they don't have houses, they don't have any defensive buildings or anything like that, it gives them an economy advantage early because they don't have to build any houses. But it does mean that they can't build any defenses, so you are not going to be able to play a defensive playstyle where you just boom up. And you wouldn't want to anyways. Even if you could, their economy is very lacking, and they don't have any cards or anything really that helps them boom effectively. And you don't really have anything that you need to boom to. Like, there's not, many extremely good cards that you could get, like where you fast fortress with the Spanish, you get the Lancers. Well, you fast fortress with these guys, you get like rifle riders, but those aren't going to be very good. You might as well just keep using your bow riders for villager raiding. So I think their best strategies really revolve around cavalry, mobility, hitting the enemy early, keeping their villager count down to even the economy game with yourself, and then kind of cheesy strategies. So you have early bow rider rush, you have Tashunki Prowler raiding, and you have TP, forward bases with TPs to boost your unit's HP and attack by a lot. So yeah, they have a lot of I would say they have a few viable strategies, and they're pretty unique. And it's not to say that their normal units like Wakina rifles and things like that aren't good. It's just that I don't think their economy is there to produce that many of them. And other troops are just going to outproduce you. They're like, let's say you go against the Swedes, they'll have Karelians and artillery. They'll completely wipe out your Wakina rifles and other infantry in no time. So you really need to take advantage of their cavalry. You need to be raiding the enemy. You need to be killing their villagers to make up for your own poor economy. And I think that's kind of what they're all about. They're all about early aggression, retaining map control. If they do get to your base, it's pretty much over. Yeah, you can have defensive TPs, but they're pretty weak. They can be taken down quickly. and they have to be in the radius, so they could just go around them and hit villagers that aren't within that radius. So um, overall, I think the Lakota are really a civilization that you need to be aggressive with, especially now after the Prowler buff or nerf, I should say. That was kind of like the one strategy where you could sit back, and it still wasn't great, right? It's still a cheesy strategy, and if they have some dragoons, they can still take you out. But it was the kind of like their one strategy that you could do in a late game to actually, fight the enemies. And we'll see how good it still is, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as good. So I imagine their late game is going to be even weaker. So I think going forward, they're mainly going to be viable in more competitive, like 1v1 scenarios, but mainly for the early game aggression. And if they're able to hold you back, then to be honest, you probably lost the game from there. So I think the Civ is more for players who are really good at microing their military units and are good at working their way around the enemy's military units. You're going to have less military units because of your weaker economy generally, but your units are generally, I think, like bow riders are just like better. They're just like a very good unit and better than what enemies can really get that early. So it's very hard for them to take them out if you're microing them effectively. So I think to really take advantage of the Lakota strength, you need to be a strong player at microing your military while still like building villages at home. And if you can do that, you have a chance. But if you are not good at microing and raiding all over the map with your cavalry, then you're probably going to lose the game. And if you end up losing map control and they're able to attack your base, then you're going to lose the game that way also. So if you like that kind of play style where you're being a very aggressive player, then I think you'll love the civilization. Definitely take them for a spin. But if you want to be a civilization that kind of booms up into the late game, gets artillery, all that kind of stuff, then you probably won't like the Civ at all. So kind of up to personal preference, but definitely an interesting Civ and a very unique civilization. Personally, not one of my favorites because I'm more of a boom player. I generally am not a big fan, and I'm not very good at going for early aggression and microing well enough to make it worth my while. I'm much better at playing defensively. So for me, it's not one of my favorites, but I think for a certain type of player, it can be extremely fun and very and a very good strategy to go for that early aggression and be mobile with those boat riders. It's definitely been used against me to great effect, I would say. So I think, yeah, for certain plays out there, it'll definitely be very effective and very fun. So yeah, that's basically the Lakota. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications so that you'll see my new Civ overviews when they come out. And other than that, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.